that. Okay. If you don't want to be seen, it's best to turn off your camera in the recording, that is. But we are recording today's session, and it will be converted into a podcast, and that will be used on the CKTZ website and the CCEDA website, and we will also look to air this on CKTZ Public Radio. And is there public radio on Quadra, Jen? If so, we'll put it on there too if they're interested. And it's seeing the chats come in here. We got Bowen Island, Seashell, Collectivo Truck in Oaxaca. Okay, great. Kate, thanks for that. So we're seeing folks coming in from Victoria, back of a truck on Cortes. That's a personal favorite of my kids. We got Quadra, Gabriola, where Carmen's coming in from Vancouver, but on our way to Cortes. And we got someone on a bluff overlooking Quadra, overlooking Twin Islands. Okay, we must be neighbors, Susanna. Okay, great. Well, the chat, please come in, keep coming in on the chat here. Let us know where you're at and your transportation experiences. So yeah, we are recording today's session, and we will make that available in the future. So today we're going to hear from 5 speakers representing different passenger transportation programs in our region. And we're going to have a little bit of Q&A with them afterward. So if you have questions throughout the forum, burning questions are coming up that you really are dying to know more about, please feel free to put those in the chat. We'll be monitoring, and then we'll make sure we ask the questions at the end. And also that gives the speakers a chance to know some of the things that you're thinking about. So yeah, please feel free throughout the session to use the chat to raise any questions that come up for you. I do want to acknowledge that this event has been is a partnership with Folk University and supported by the Cortes Island Community Foundation. I think Amanda is on from the foundation, and they're going to be helping us to process all the content into the podcast in the future. So, all right, I think those are that's the overview for me. I'm going to be kind of facilitating the session, and you're going to hear from the next person I'd like to introduce is really our ringleader here. Kate Madigan is the person that's really brought our team together. Jen Banks Dahl and myself, and Kate and Steve have been working on this and will be involved in the next few months as we narrow down the options. And so I'd like to introduce Kate, who will tell you a little bit more about our initiative, and then we'll go on to Jen. So over to you, Kate.
Thanks, Sadu. Hey, this is so great. There's no echo, is there? It's okay. Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, there's been so many transportation studies been done for our area. Well, not tons, but enough that people are kind of going, why are we doing another one? And this is just a real opportunity to drill down into one of the things that I think Cortes Island has been trying to get for a long time. And really it's the cross quadra piece for us. It's just, we're an island away from all of our essential services in Campbell River. So this is just a real opportunity to take many recommendations for improving transportation and really looking at passenger transportation. And we're so lucky to have received funding from the Island Coastal Economic Trust for this. And there's a bunch of other communities on Vancouver Island that received the same kind of funding. So it's just so great to be able to do this. We've got a really good team. I really feel good about this project. And I think we're going to come up with some really good options for people to consider. There's just so many moving parts. We've got this learning forum, we've got the survey, another couple of in-person meetings, both in the spring and then in the fall. And it's just got such a tight timeline. We're going to wrap it up in October. So we're really hoping to have some good recommendations for everybody and just to move forward and really get things going. So thanks everybody for attending today. And I think that's it for me. Thanks,
Kate.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your leadership on this. And I'm seeing in the chat here, we've got someone coming in from Denman, and we've got Squirrel Cove represented. So we've got Sonora Island, Quadra, Vancouver. So yeah, good regional attendance. It's really fun to see so many people from all around. And I'd like now to introduce Jen Banks-Dahl, and she's going to tell us really what to expect in the next few months with the specific consultations. And Jen, maybe even give us a snapshot of what we've heard in the survey in the last week as we've been doing the survey. So Jen, over to you.
Thanks, Sadhu. Hi, everyone. I am Jen Banks-Dahl coming to you from Quadra Island. And yeah, we launched our survey last Monday, and we've had right now 231 people respond. So we're pretty thrilled about that. We're hoping to make 250, or at least I'm hoping to make 250. We're going to have a draw at the end of our evening tonight because we used a prize draw to incentivize people to respond. So Sadhu, could you just put the link to the survey in the chat in case there's anyone on the call who hasn't done the survey and would like to? It's for residents of Cortes, Quadra, and the Outer Islands, and everyone else, because we really want to know the perspectives of visitors to our islands on passenger transportation. So in a minute, I'm just going to give you a few quick highlights of what we're hearing in the survey. But first of all, I just wanted to mention that we do have some in-person meetings coming up. So on June 1st, we'll be meeting in person on Quadra at the Legion in Harriet Bay from 1 until 3 p.m. Moving to Cortes on June 2nd from 1 to 3 p.m. at Manson's Hall. And then for those people who can't make it on a weekend, because of course there's always a million things happening on our islands on the weekend, we will be doing a meeting on Zoom on June 6th from 7 to 9 p.m. So that's a Thursday. And all of that information is on our website. I think probably everyone has probably seen the website so far, but maybe Sadhu, if you could just pop that in the chat, just in case people haven't seen it. We have lots of information on there. So I'm just going to share my screen and go to the PowerPoint that I created just to quickly review a few things. Just a snapshot. We'll be going over this more when we do our in-person meetings, which will really be a chance to talk about what we've heard so far and have a discussion with each other around what we'd like to see on our island. So the survey, we've heard from more people from Quadra, but Quadra does have almost triple the population of Cortes. So probably it's around even numbers in terms of percent population from Quadra and Cortes. And we've also heard from a lot of people from the Outer Islands in the last 24 hours. So that's fantastic, as well as 5% from elsewhere, and a real mix of ages, including households with children and people with disabilities. Now, how do I advance my slides when I'm in? Okay, here we go. As you can see, we asked people what their usual destination is when they go and do things other than work or school. We know people are really active. We have a lot of retirees on our islands, and people are doing recreation, they're doing medical appointments. So the #1 destination for the respondents is actually Campbell River, which I was a bit surprised by, but I think it makes sense. A lot of people are going there for shopping, medical, those kinds of things. But there's also a lot of people going to Kwathiaski Cove and Manson's Landing, as well as a variety of other places. Overwhelmingly, they are driving their own vehicle to do those things. But there's also a real mix of other ways that they're traveling. So that's really good to see. We asked, would you be likely to use passenger transportation if it was provided for a reasonable fee? And for this one, I divided up the respondents from Cortes and the respondents from Quadra. And I just did this now, so I didn't get a chance to go into the Outer Islands. But it was really interesting to see that of the respondents from Cortes, they were more interested in passenger transportation on Quadra than they were on Cortes. And then most popular was used for people on Quadra to use passenger transportation on Quadra. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Now, we broke down what type of passenger transportation they would be most likely to use. And this is really relevant for our learning forum tonight because we're going to be talking about buses, but also van pool, which is a type of rideshare. And we're going to be talking about ride hailing. So this is basically how it broke down. And as you can see, the most popular again was bus on Quadra, but I think people would be interested in all kinds of different forms were they available. And then finally, what motivates you? The most common motivation was wanting to limit use of fossil fuel. But then, there was some other things as well, like reducing the ferry, the traffic on the ferry is a big motivator for us because we have a lot of overloads. And then just preferring not to drive was the third most popular. So that's just a snapshot. We can't say that it represents our island population exactly because, like I said, it's only 231 respondents, but I think it really gives us a good snapshot of where people are leaning and the interest in passenger transportation. And it also is useful because we can compare it to previous surveys. And that's it for me.
Wonderful. Thanks for the snapshot. That gives us a sense of where people are at. And when you start to see numbers at 60 and 70%, you kind of get a sense that there's strong interest. So, and it's impressive. We've gotten over 200, almost, I think about 250 responses to our survey in less than a week. So, yeah, just to jump in now to some of our featured speakers, here we are, many of us feeling like there aren't that many viable options to our private car. And the idea of having some form of passenger transportation to help us get across Quadra or get around feels really hard to imagine how we would do that. Is there enough interest? How would we go about setting something like this up? And so we, the little project team here, we're thinking, well, before we really dive into putting together a pilot for Cortes and Quadra, we should really dive in and understand how have other places done this? What's working? What are the challenges? What are the things we should be thinking about as we jump in? And, this feels a little bit urgent for me because in 2025, the Quadra Cortes ferry is going to be shut down for 3 months. And so bringing cars around is going to be hard. There's going to be a lot of challenges, and this provides challenge, but also opportunity for us. And so maybe we'd get up a pilot going in that time frame. But so we thought, before we jump in and put together a specific proposal for our community, let's learn from others that have done this. And so we're really, really lucky to have these incredible examples in our immediate region that have really done this over the last decade or two, and some of them are even newer. And so tonight is all about learning from leading examples. And we were hoping for the real deal. What's been the challenge? What are the things that you wish you would have done differently? So we asked each of the speakers that are with us this evening to tell us a little bit about what specifically did they do, why did they choose to do that form of transportation? What's working? What's a challenge that they're having? What are they struggling with? How do they get it funded? And for a fledgling effort like ours, what recommendations might they have? And so we're going to be zooming around the region from Gabriola to Powell River, and really looking forward to hearing each of the presentations. I've asked each presenter to speak to us for 10 minutes. And as they get to that 10 minutes, I'm going to start nudging in. And I've already asked for forgiveness if I seem a little pushy in that regard. And then afterward, we're going to have a chance to have a dialogue. And they can even riff off, have conversation with each other. So our first speaker is Steve. and put his bio, short write-up in the chat there, tell you about him. Steve, we're really fortunate, has been helping us with this project. So he's on our project team and will be in person with us during our in-person events coming up that you just heard about. So Steve, his bio's there. He's been working, he's been on Gabriola for 15 years, a number of sustainability projects, and prolific writer too. But he's also been involved with Gertie, the Gabriola Community Shuttle. So that's kind of our first thing we're going to be learning about, is a community shuttle. So Steve, over to you.
Thank you, Sadhu. It's great to be involved with this group. It's been really fun. And so I'm coming to you from Nanaimo territory on Gabriola Island, where we have the Gertie bus. And I'm going to tell you something about that, if I can get this to work. There it is. Okay. Are you seeing anything?
We're not seeing your screen yet, Stephen.
Okay. Why not? Share. There it is.
Okay, now we are. Great.
Okay.
That's good.
Yeah.
You can go to presenter presentation mode too on the bottom right if you want.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about the Gabriola Community Bus, or the Gertie Bus, Gabriola's environmentally responsible Trans-Island Express. There's an early picture from about 2014 of one of the buses we had back then, along with a whole bunch of the drivers. All of the drivers then were volunteer drivers, and there's a number of other people that were on the organizing committee, and the regional director who helped us get it going, and so on. Anyway, that's what we looked like a long time ago. We are, at the beginning, we were completely volunteer drivers and funded by wherever we could find money, small grants here and there, plus fares and so on. But in 2016, we had a referendum on Gabriola, and whether people wanted to have some of their property tax money go to a bus, and that was approved by 69%, which is a pretty healthy approval rating. And so since 2016, we've been able to put more money into it. We have paid drivers, a paid coordinator, and it's made it quite a bit easier. We also collect fares, just $2.75 a ride, and anyone under 14 is free. But we don't get any operational funding from BC or Canada. So we're not like a BC Transit operation, where they get about 50% of their funding from the BC government. We don't get any of that. All of our money comes from that tax allocation, and it amounts to something like $200,000 a year. We've also been successful in getting grants for various things, renovating a building that we use as our depot. And we recently got money from the federal government's Rural Transit Solutions Fund to purchase 2 new electric buses. Those buses we're just about in the process, or just about to finalize the order for those buses, but we don't expect to see them for about a year. It takes a long time. Anyway, that's part of how we work. There's Gabriola. Gabriola is an island of about 4,000, maybe 4,200 people in the winter. So not so different from Quadra. We have 4 different routes around the island. And I'll just show you the schedules. We have service in the morning between about 7 and 8 or 9 in the morning, and then 5 hours of service during the middle of the day from 10 o'clock to 2:30, and then 2 hours of service in the late afternoons from about 4 to 6. And we do not have any service on Sundays or on stat holidays, and we do reduced service over Christmas. So it's the point I want to make here is that we're not out there all day long, every day of the week. And that's an issue if somebody wants to be able to get somewhere whenever they want to get there. People have to understand the schedule and go when the bus goes, which can be an issue. This is what our ridership looks like since we started in 2013. For the first 7 years, we had steadily climbing ridership, and that peaked in 2019 with about maximum of 500 riders a week. That's something like 80 or so riders a day. And then COVID hit in early 2020, and the bottom fell out of our ridership, just like every other bus system in the world, probably. And we've been trying to climb back out of that well ever since. And it's been tricky. There've been other issues that we've faced, but we are slowly getting back to where we were in 2019. And we expect to surpass 200,000 riders by the end of this summer. Originally, we thought it would be a service for commuters, and it still is to a large degree. And we made sure we met important ferries. We always, in the afternoons, if the ferry's late, we wait for the ferry to come in because we don't want our faithful riders to be stranded. And we also make lots of stops in the village. But we found that a lot of the riders aren't commuters. They're just people that want to get around, go to the village, do things, and so on. So it's changed a little bit from what we originally thought. And then in the summer, we get a lot of visitors to Gabriola. Some come in boats, as you can see in the picture there. A lot come on the ferry as foot passengers. And so that's why our ridership picks up quite a bit in the summer. So initially, our goal was to reduce transportation GHG emissions, just like 80-something% of the people that have taken the survey on Cortes and Quadra. That, of course, is still a key focus. Originally, we were using waste vegetable oil in the buses mixed with diesel. And then we got some newer buses and they didn't like waste vegetable oil. So we started making biodiesel, and we were using biodiesel. And then we got some newer buses and they didn't like biodiesel. So we're back to regular diesel. But as I said earlier, we are hoping to go fully electric within a year from now. And so that will be part of our reducing GHG emissions. Even with fully diesel, we do reduce GHG emissions because we have 5 or 10 people on the bus at once. The other thing that's really important is that the bus is part of the social network on Gabriola. People socialize on the bus. The drivers, they know virtually all of the regular riders by name. They know where they get on and when they get on. And if someone's not there on a particular day, the driver will say, I wonder where Bert is. And one of the passengers will say, well, don't know, maybe I need to phone him and find out what's up, why he's not here. So it's a really important aspect of the social framework of Gabriola. But one of our main problems is with maintenance. We've never had enough money to buy new buses. And so we've always bought secondhand buses, and most of them are, well, the average age right now is close to 10 years. They're buses that other bus systems have used and then got rid of because they knew they weren't going to keep working forever. And that's definitely the fact. So a significant part of our budget and time spent is on keeping buses going. I'll give you an example. We have one bus that we spent $6,000 on just this spring to get it back in working order. And about a week later, it broke down again, and we're now faced with an $11,000 bill to get it back in working order. It's sort of one damn thing after another with older buses. They get well used, and as you can imagine, the roads aren't perfect here on Gabriola. So even though with the current schedule, we only have one bus operating at a time, we have to have 2 working buses to be confident that we're going to be out there the next day in case something goes wrong. And so we have a half-time coordinator, 8 part-time paid drivers. None of them works more than 50% time, but they're happy with that. They love what they do. They're great with our passengers. The drivers are really one of the best things about the bus. But everything else that is done by the board. And that includes getting grant money, doing all the financial stuff, schedules, routes, promotion. That's all done by volunteers. And it's a lot of work, as you can imagine. But we're happy to do it because we know that Gabriola loves its bus. So just to the questions that were posed, I'll just give you some quick answers to those questions. What transportation type? It's a scheduled transit bus. We have fixed routes. We don't have fixed stops for the most part. We'll stop anywhere. People just flag us down. We chose a bus because we think it's the most efficient and affordable way for both us and the riders to move a lot of people around the island. What's working well? Most things, most of the time, work well. But as I said, we do have some issues. But Gertie is highly appreciated by Gabrielans and visitors. As I said, we struggle with vehicle maintenance. It's a big problem. There's a bit of a problem with burnout of board members, and we wish we could offer more frequent service, more hours of the day into the evenings. We don't have any evening service. And
Steve, we're just at about 10 minutes here.
Okay, I'm just about done here.
Okay.
We fund it with property tax allocation and grants, and recommendations for Cortes and Quadra: start slowly with volunteer drivers and the very best vehicles you can get. And it's not easy to get buses right now. So that can be a problem. I mean, used buses. And also get broad support right from the start by involving community members. And I will stop there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. What an inspiring example to get us started. Thanks for your leadership. Really just wonderful to see what you've done and how you've done it. So we're gonna switch gears a little bit at this point. And we're gonna keep moving. But thank you for that great presentation, Steve. We're gonna go to Ryan. And I just put Ryan's bio in our chat there. Ryan is the founder of Coastal Rides, which is a ride-hailing service or transportation network service, as they call them. And they are operating in the Lower Sunshine Coast, Comox Valley, Campbell River, Port St. John, and Tofino. So kind of across the region. And maybe one day closer to home here, but really glad that you could join us, Ryan, and I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yeah, thank you. And I just shared my screen. Hopefully you guys can see that.
Yeah, it's great. We see it.
Yeah, so thanks for the intro. I'm coming to you from the traditional territory of the Sechelle people of Sechelle Nation in Sechelle. It's on the Sunshine Coast. Yeah, and I'll try to answer your questions as we go through, maybe not specifically, and I've got some examples and some thoughts to leave you with. Yeah, so Coastal Rides is a company, technically for profit. We'll see if that ever happens. It's my company. I started it. This is me in the picture at the Langdale Ferry Terminal, and this is probably the place where Coastal Rides started, probably almost 10 years ago, when the ferry, anybody who's taken a ferry knows that they're usually late. And so the ferry usually comes into Langdale Terminal late, and the bus, BC Transit services, but the bus leaves on time. So when you get here on the late ferry, usually the bus isn't there. So, those years ago, I thought, there must be a different way of doing this. And then I was looking into, taxis and other options. And then in 2019, the provincial government changed the passenger transportation regulation to allow Uber and Lyft into Metro Vancouver, et cetera. And so I applied for that same license, and applied in October 2019, and the end of February of 2020, I got the go-ahead. And of course, the world changed after that. And so it's been an uphill battle ever since, but here we are, we're still going. A little bit about Coastal Rides. So what is, we're a licensed as a transportation network service, just like Uber, Lyft. Drivers and vehicles have to meet provincial requirements. So I'll explain a little bit more about what some of those are. And then trips are booked and paid through our online system. So we have an app. You also book through our website. We're just working with our technology provider to have potentially a voice AI booking system where you can book over the phone as well. It's one of the challenges for some of the older populations in the areas we serve, is that sometimes the app system is difficult to use, and I don't have time to answer the phone all the time. Where we operate, we're on the Lower Sunshine Coast, Gibson, Seashell, Earls Cove. That's where I live, so that's where we've been able to be strongest. We're on Vancouver Island in the Comox Valley. I've got some friends that joined me in the company to help out, and so they're based there. Pretty good service to and from YQQ, Comox Airport there. We do have right now just one driver based in Campbell River, and so you can get from Campbell River to the first flight out of YQQ if needed. And actually, we had somebody dropped off on Quadra the other day. We'll do trips, from the airport. These are sort of a premium kind of service, and the rider would have to pay for the ferry fare for the driver as well. And then, long distance trips across the island. The drivers based in Comox and Campbell River are happy to go somewhere, go a long way if it's a longer trip. Just launched in Tofino, so that's exciting. Another company out there that was operating went out of business, and we have been working with the local drivers there to get things going again. Fort St. John has been limited, but I was approached by the municipal government in Fort St. John about operating, and we said, okay, yeah, we'll give it a try. The thing about a lot of areas, we actually operated in Prince George briefly when we first started, but a lot of great people, but there's a lot of work opportunities, so it's easy for people to get snapped up and doing something else. So it's been hard to have a dedicated group of drivers in that area to make it go all the time. CCEDA Island, we also had service on CCEDA Island from November 2021 to January 2024. We just basically had one driver who wanted to make it happen. And, he had his Class 4 license, he had a vehicle that was appropriate, and he was, basically retired, but looking to do something else and help the community out. And so he was available if people booked to go to the first ferry or from the last ferry. And it was great to have him. But, it was not a huge amount of volume to make it work, just over 200 trips during that time that he was operating. And in the end, we came up against the regulatory sort of roadblock of vehicles needing to be less than 10 years old to operate on TNS systems in BC. And so he had a great vehicle that was 10 years old that had less than 100,000 kilometers, but we couldn't, I've asked the legislative committee on passenger transportation to look at this, and we'll see the reports out, but no changes yet. We looked at doing switching over to a taxi license and applying for a taxi license, but the base insurance on his vehicle was over 3 times more expensive than the regular personal insurance, and so that was cost prohibitive. So it didn't make sense to do that there. And with our system, you can have a regular vehicle that's insured for personal use. As soon as you have a trip in our app, then our blanket insurance policy takes over and covers the vehicle, driver, passengers, etc., for paying passenger transportation. No interest from other local drivers yet, so we'll see. We'll try to get things going again there, but nothing yet. How it works for us, most drivers are owner operators. They're usually paid 73% of the fare. So in terms of how we pay for this is all paid by customers. And we do have to pay Ministry of Transportation fees. We pay a lot to ICBC. On average, drivers, including deadhead, especially in these communities, is huge compared to what an Uber driver in the city, for example, would do. So on average, the driver is driving at least at least as many kilometers with nobody on board as with passengers on board. So they're going a long way to pick people up. But on average, the driver will be earning about $1 per kilometer. So if you're somebody who has the time to be available and is doing other things, sitting around at home, and so you're not worrying about how much you're making per hour, but and then you get a decent sort of earning when you're actually, the wheels are turning. So you have to have the right people that are interested and available for that. In some of the communities, like here in Sechelt and Tofino, it's busy enough that drivers, it could be a full-time job. Driver requirements. So you need a class 4, 2, or 1 BC driver's license. So commercial driver's license, no driving convictions in the last 3 years, and less than 3 tickets in the last 2 years, and then do a criminal record and vulnerable sectors checks as well. And then all vehicles need to be less than 10 years old and pass a commercial vehicle inspection. Right. What would we need, if you wanted to have us open things up on Quadra, on Cortes, we probably need 2 or 3 at least committed people that are available a good chunk of time. I mean, we're online here. We have drivers on the Sunshine Coast and in Tofino now from 6 a.m. until 2 a.m. Every day. You may or may not need that there. We could look at various scheduling opportunities, but we're pretty flexible. And if the people are there and qualified and have access to a vehicle that meets the requirements, we're happy to work with them. But really, it is the local drivers that make it happen in the communities where we do operate. That's my contact information, info@coastalrides.ca, and the web links to Drive With Us, and as well as our website. So thank you. And any questions, or happy to move it along to the discussion later.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ryan. Thank you for doing what you're doing. I'm sure you've had some sleepless nights getting this up and running. So yeah. Thanks for your service. Yeah, you can stop sharing screen now, and yeah, we'll definitely get to a discussion and look forward to some questions. But neat contrast to the first presentation. So that was kind of really interesting to hear the different approaches to solving similar problems. Yeah. So yeah, thanks for what you're doing and for sharing it with us. We're going to keep moving right along here, and I'd like to introduce Anna Lukyanova. And Anna works for the City of Powell River, and she's the sustainability planner, and oversees lots of decarbonization projects, public buildings, and bicycle cycling infrastructure, Vision Zero for transportation safety improvements, and the city's on-demand transit service, the Zunga Bus. And that's what she'll be sharing with us this evening. So Anna, thank you so much for joining us. And Anna's bio is in the chat there, and I'll hand it over to you, Anna.
Thanks so much, Sadhu, and thanks for having me. I'm joining from the traditional territory of the Tla'amin Nation, the city of Powell River here. Our small city is about 14,000 people. And we have what I believe is BC's only operating on-demand service, even though, correction, BC Transit, I think, just launched a small pilot in Kelowna, but we're certainly the longest running on-demand microtransit service. And it's called Zunga Bus. Let me advance my slides here. So as you know, just a little bit of background for how it came about. So as you all know, convenient public transit is a challenge in small communities. When there is a transit service, there's often long wait times, long travel times, windy routes, transfers. Often there's also poor or non-existent pedestrian infrastructure, right? So even if you arrive somewhere on the bus and you only need to walk a block or two, there may not be a sidewalk or crosswalk or street lights, etc. So that's a challenge as well. And then we're faced with aging population, rising housing, transportation costs, and our sustainability imperatives. So those are all the reasons for why we are looking to improve our public transit system in Powell River. And this is just a snapshot of, we do have what we call conventional transit. So those are big BC Transit buses that go around, and you'll see the route map there. And we describe that as spaghetti transit system, right? So we have all these routes that attempt to cover the community. They're long and they're windy, and they sort of make a best attempt at covering the city, but they're infrequent. So the bus would come every hour or so, maybe every 40 minutes at peak times. And so what that means for you as a person trying to get around town, say, if you're going from one neighborhood to the other, this is just a sample trip plan from Google Maps, and you need to be at work by 9 o'clock, you're going to be leaving at about 7:30, right? So you have to allow an hour and a half to get to your work by bus. And if you are, physically able and have the financial means to drive, it's going to take you about 12 minutes. So that's a big difference. And this is really, I think, a really good illustration for what the challenges are with transit in small communities, and why the only people that take transit are really people who have no other option. And we want to do better. We want it to be an option for people that's more feasible to meet their daily needs. And so that's how Zangak Bus came about. And I would actually like to show you folks a short video. It's just 2.5 minutes, and it just does a really good job summarizing exactly what we did with Zangak Bus and why. And the sound may not come through, but that's okay, because it's just background music. So I'm just going to hit play, let you watch that. And that's it for the video. I hope that just provided a bit of a storyline there, and I'll share some more recent updates and where we're at. So yes, we launched the service initially with support from some Innovative Solutions Canada funding that helped us with the on-demand software that we used. But since that funding lapsed, we've been funding it ourselves. So our council has shown quite the commitment to the service. And it's not part of the BC transit system, so we're not getting half of the service covered by the province. So the city taxpayers basically covering the entire cost. It still kind of stayed with those limited pilot-like hours, and it's only one bus in operation at a time, even though we do have a spare bus in case that bus breaks down. So it runs from 11 o'clock till 7 p.m., 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. So it's a bit limited hours of operation. Just to some really practical details, it's about $200,000 a year to operate, including union drivers with benefits, vehicle lease, software cost. We have a call center as well, so people can book by calling as well as the app to address that challenge that was mentioned before with people not being comfortable with the app sometimes. And we're working towards hopefully having BC Transit wrap it into their service and fund it for us. And so what we found through our experience is that we actually better off having one streamlined route that's kind of like a beeline along the coast, along the coast, pardon me, that people can easily understand, and increasing the frequency on that route, and then using Zanga Bus on demand to kind of bring people into that route from areas of our town that are a little bit too far out. And so we're currently in the process of working with BC Transit trying to make that happen. Some of the successes, I guess, Zanga Bus has been operating, our council has been committed to it. It's certainly increased access to people that previously weren't satisfied or transit wasn't meeting their needs. We're getting consistent ridership, so we're at about roughly 5 rides per hour right now throughout the operating hours. And it costs about $80 roughly per hour to run the bus with all expenses included. So I guess, and that means that we're roughly costing about $15 per ride that we provide, and we're charging $225, right? So it's certainly not, we're not making money on the service. It's a service that we provide and invest in community. What should I say? In terms of challenges, so right now with the way it was set up initially, we are seeing that the demand is actually exceeding bus availability. So we only have one vehicle covering an area there's just a lot of demand for it. And so what we're seeing are people trying to call the bus and they're getting a really long wait time. And that's, sometimes can be discouraging for people. So we sort of a bit of too much, I guess, with the service. We have to match the area that we're covering with the vehicles. Right? We cannot cover everything with one bus. So we either need to throw more buses into it, or we need to actually shrink the area and limit the service that's on demand and direct people more towards that fixed route conventional bus that we're improving frequency on. The limited hours are the challenge, and the political commitment to funding it as a challenge, especially because the city pays for it fully without any support from the province or federal government right now. I think that's it. Those are the main points on the Zanga Bus.
Thank you so much, Anna. It's a fascinating contrast to the other two presentations. Like, it's really amazing to see, and really love the focusing on poverty alleviation and recognizing the challenge for people that are relying on that they got to go an hour and a half. So yeah, thank you very much for your leadership and for sharing the case study with us. And we're going to move on now to our next presenter. And we're going to be hearing now from Sam Borthwick, who is the coordinator for the Denman Island bus service. And yeah, so we're really interested. I'm really interested to hear kind of how that contrasts with some of the other programs we've heard about. So I'm going to hand it off to you now, Sam.
Hi, yeah, I don't have a fancy presentation, but I can share you, we've got our website up and I can kind of run from there a little bit. If Sadhu wants to give me the ability to share.
Okay, yes, great. I'm going to do that right now. Sorry. Okay, here we go.
That's okay. I did say that I wasn't going to have anything, so.
No, that's cool. No problem. You're allowed to pivot. Okay, there you go. You should be live now.
Should do the thing. So yeah, I am the coordinator for the Denman Island bus service. We started in 2020, and I definitely have a lot of sympathy for both what Ryan and what Steve were saying about the challenges of kind of trying to do transit through the pandemic. The first year I'd actually applied to be a driver. And then we got to the end of that year, and the people who were then running it, so Denman Island or Denman Works, which is our economic enhancement society, who are the contractors sort of handling it, this program through from the CVRD, said, well, actually, we could really use a coordinator. And I was like, well, I signed up to drive, but I guess if there's no coordinator, there's no job. So, and yeah, it's been a bit of a wild ride since there. To begin with, it was entirely provided. It was a ambassador transportation from Comox. We're providing basically a shuttle bus from one ferry to the other. And so we actually have a very similar situation to Quadra in this, that we are the island between two, the big island and another community island. And in our case, Denman is relatively quiet compared to Hornby, which is a major sort of tourist destination these days. And so one of the main focuses for the CBRD at the time was trying to find a way to get people across the islands, try to relieve some of the strain on the ferries, and yeah, facilitate that journey. So the first year, which I was not really involved in, was just a shuttle that basically went from ferry to ferry, back and forth. And so when I took over as coordinator, for me personally, my big part of sort of my focus for it was I really wanted this to be a community service. I wanted really something to be that catered to not just being a bridge across, but also really got into sort of like supporting what was actually needed here, and not just a shuttle, which basically didn't stop between either ferry. It just sort of made a loop. And so, yeah, for the first year, we leased some vehicles from the same transit ambassador. We had 2 vehicles, one that was running on the weekend, which was basically just still doing the same shuttle service as before. But then I started running the service during the week, and we were told we were going to get a 14-seater transit van, but what we wound up getting was a 6-seater Honda Odyssey, which for much of the year had Denman Island bus written in the dust on the side, because we didn't have a sign yet. I did most of the driving that year. And yeah, we sort of did a loop that sort of covered the whole island. In the year that followed, it really became clear, like, we were paying quite a lot for these vehicles, and also we weren't getting the flexibility. We didn't have the control we wanted. So we started looking for a bus. And I in my own research got obsessed with school buses and did a lot of research into the history and the safety, stuff around school buses, and that seemed like a cool thing. And that's where we went. We got an old school bus. We got it wrapped in red because Hornby's bus at the time was blue, and I didn't want the bus to be yellow. So I was also born in London, in England, so red buses have a historical connection for me. And yeah, that was part of the sort of journey there. And so from that year, we started running sort of back and forth. And that first year, we did about 1,000, a little bit over 1,000 people rode the bus. And last year, we had a little over over 3,000 people rode. So big growth. And that's, I think, one of the big things that I keep saying as I sort of go through this process is it takes time to percolate into the collective consciousness of your community, especially if your community has been relying on their own transit for a long time. We definitely had people who initially were even hostile to the idea of having a bus. It was this concept of like, well, if it's driving around empty, this is actually not being an environmental thing. And it's been important to me that I think the question is, you got to stick with it. And until it's something that people can just unconsciously think of, or it's just in their collective consciousness that's an option, people aren't going to change overnight. You've got to prove that it's reliable. You've got to prove that it's consistent, and then you've got to be there. You've got to show up. You got to be at the places when you say you're going to be at them. one of the other things I'm saying all the time to my drivers is, you know, the bus can be a little bit late, but it can never be early. Nobody hates anything more than an early bus, because if it leaves just as you're getting there, that's infuriating. So yeah, the other, so we call it the scuttle bus, which is a bit of a pun on scuttlebutt, being a term for sort of gossip and that place for the sort of social connection that Steve was talking about. And so I also wanted to go with you know, a local creature, without wanting to be appropriating something that is very like one of the bigger First Nations animals. They do obviously show up in First Nations art, but it's not one of the big few. So this is our sort of route. We do a sort of a loop of the island, and we do try and connect the two ferries. What we found a lot, and especially if there is sort of transit that's happening on Quadra, what I'll encourage those people, I don't know if the ferries do it quite so much, because you've got bigger gaps than we do, certainly between Quadra and Cortes, but our ferries often go into shuttle mode, which meant that, so initially tried to build a schedule that would allow us to meet each ferry. Of course, as soon as they go into shuttle mode, that goes out the window. And the initial sort of push from the CVRD was, and from Hornby certainly was, we want to see a ferry that means that you can walk on, and we want to see a bus that means we can walk off the ferry on one side and then walk on to the next, connect with the next ferry. That's not always going to be possible. You're not able to do that. And certainly for me, I wanted to service these other little bits. So you can see there are a number of dog legs that come off of our bus route that frequently are frustrating to someone who just wants to go from A to B. To me, it's really important that those community stops are there. They service, you know, there's population densities in those places. And honestly, none of our Gulf Islands are such horrible places to wait for half an hour, 40 minutes for a ferry. My experience has been just, you know what, we'll get you there. It's not going to be an immediate thing. That's part of what we have to recognize. And when we live on these islands is that, yeah, things might take a little longer. That the whole island time thing is beyond trite as a maxim. So similarly, and I sort of want to go through these questions. So yeah, what kind of service? We're a scheduled set route service. We will pick people up anywhere along the route, anywhere that's safe to pull over. We do have stops, but they're mostly for timing. So I'll go down a little further. We run Friday through, or Thursday through Monday. So Tuesday and Wednesday are our dark days. Partly maintenance. We've only got the one vehicle, and she's old. She's 21 years old this year. So we definitely have maintenance things that happen. I've had a lot of sleepless nights this weekend from some maintenance things that were happening. But the science of developing a bus schedule is fascinating, and it's something that I have a whole new respect for. It's a very weird thing. You wind up having some very weird conversations with yourself as you're trying to plot out the timing of it all. And I've been lucky in that Hornby also has a bus service. They started a couple of years before us, and I got to do a little bit of driving for them last year. When I built my schedule, I wanted there to be gaps in between. So you'll see that where we end at Denman West on the first run at 9:25, there's 20 minutes between that and the next run. And we run all the way through we basically start at just a little after 8 a.m. and we run to just before 8 p.m. or just before 8 p.m. And the idea there was the first year that I was doing a lot of the driving, I was doing 8-hour shifts. It's a really long time to be behind the wheel, especially if you're a single driver and you're doing all of it. And frequently I was finding I'd get to the end of the route and there'd be someone who's like, oh, I just missed the last bus. And I'd be like, well, okay, of course I'm going to run you across to the other ferry. Like, I'll do that. But I was winding up with really, really long days. So having a 12-hour day, which has 2 drivers that do 6 hours each, is much more manageable. It's also a lot more in line with what's attractive for a lot of people who live on islands and maybe don't want to work themselves to death, doing this sort of stuff. And driving, I feel really strongly that it's a highly skilled, very valuable job. I want that to be a good quality job. And part of building this bus service has also been about creating jobs for people in the community. So yeah, why this was chosen? It's sort of what was available. We are funded by the CVRD, so it's part of the transportation budget from the CVRD, part of property taxes for decades. That money has gone just into the Comox Valley Transit System, which for a long time was a single bus that would come to Fanny Bay or to Buckley Bay. Initially, I think it was only 3 or 4 times a day. Now it's a little bit more regular, but still not enough to sort of cover all of that. It certainly does very little for anyone trying to get from Hornby into Comox. Things that have been working really well. I mean, in part, yeah, having our red bus that's a little bit old, but also I've had, various people have brought bits and pieces of crab things, trying to have some humor with it, trying to keep it an islandy feel. There was initially this big pressure to conform to a sort of BC Transit style model. They want to see you charging a fare, and really usually BC Transit wants to see you running a similar service to what they're doing for several years before they want to take it over. And as others have said, they'll match they'll add $1 on the dollar to whatever funding you have, which is very attractive to me. That was the plan that sort of first year, and we were charging $2 a ride. Since then, I decided actually I really like having this be a community program. And so I'm not that interested. And I was having people, I've got a couple of families who are very large.
We're just about 10 minutes, Sam. I'm just going to check in there on the time.
Absolutely. I'll wrap it up. But lots of people riding. If you've got a single mom with 5 kids and you want to get into town and back from town, you're suddenly looking at like $20 to do a round trip. So we moved to being free. I figured we pay for this through taxes already. And we weren't making enough money to support the service in a meaningful way off fares. So we sort of moved away from that. But paying our drivers is really important. That's one of our bigger costs. And yeah, maintenance, as Stephen was saying, can be a big thing. But yeah, the community connections that we have on board are really valuable. But it's important to remember that this is infrastructure. So it takes time for people to kind of get used to it. And it takes time for it to become part of the reflex understanding of how to get around your community and just to get the word out. Like it takes a while for these things to percolate. So, it can take time, but it's worth it to really sort of like set some good goals to begin with and then stick with them and trust that it will come. People will come for it. I'm really excited to hear what you guys are doing on Cortes and would be really very happy to help however I can. This project has become very, very near and dear to my heart. And I'm obviously trying to follow in the footsteps of the Gertie bus, who are doing really great stuff.
Thanks, Sam. Wonderful presentation. It's nice to see free service too. That's a really interesting kind of logic model there. Kind of makes a lot of sense. If fares are going to be a deterrent, but not raise that much money, it's kind of like, anyway, really great presentation. Thanks for the example. We're going to go to our last formal presentation here and introduce to you Chuck Fowler, who is the driver and organizer. So everyone that we've talked to, most people we've talked to today are dual purposes. They're behind the steering wheel and behind a computer, it sounds like. Yeah, so Chuck is the organizer of the Bowen Island Van Pool. So really curious to hear kind of how that's different from some of the things that we've talked about today. And surprisingly, he's an optician by trade. So I'm interested to maybe we'll talk about careers, because we're going to need to get some people interested in driving if we're going to make this thing work. That seems to be a common denominator with all of these things. So thanks, Chuck, for being on, and really looking forward to hearing about the Van Pool program. So over to you.
How you doing? So suffering from a little bit of imposter syndrome, because my experience with this sounds like it's quite different from what everybody else has been doing. It is purely a commuter service, so there's not so much about getting around on the island as opposed to basically suffer through BC ferries and get people to and from work in Vancouver. Those who don't know, Bowen's 20-minute ferry ride to Horseshoe Bay, but I work just outside UBC, And so this is a daily occurrence, but it's one way in the morning and one way in the evening. And it started long before I came into the picture. The van pool actually has been running from Bowen since the mid 90s. And it was part of a Jack Bell Rideshare Association program that was in conjunction with TransLink. There was something at its peak, there was something like 200 cars, I think, that were in service in the Lower Mainland and Kelowna and Victoria. And all you had to do was sign up. You got a van or a car, and you covered your operating expenses by having a full load of people. You paid Jack Bell directly, and Jack Bell program took care of insurance. It took care of leasing a vehicle, and we didn't even pay for our fuel. We had a Petro-Canada card. You'd go to the gas station, you'd fill up, and once a month we filled in the mileage and paid Jack Bell their rate. But somewhere around 2017-ish, they started running out of money. I have no idea where the funding came from or how it got used, because all the vehicles their operating expenses were covered by the ridership. At any rate, there was rideshare programs, there was Car2Go, there's Evo and things like that in the city that they had said was potentially having an impact on how many people were signing up to the rideshare program, or to Jack Bell. And we were given the option of buying the van or returning the keys and the vehicle to them. And we had a group of 7 people at the time who still wanted to keep the program going. So we bought this Chevy Astro from them that had 300,000 kilometers on it, and carried on. And hearing Steve talk about reliability, that was a major issue. For 2 years, we probably spent $1,000 each year on maintenance. And so we saved a bit of money. We continued taking in the same amount of money from all our riders as we had been while we were paying the lease cost on the van, or what would have been the lease cost, and pooled that money and bought a new vehicle. So, but because it's all grassroots, we're not a co-op, we're not a society. Somebody had to buy the vehicle, so I stepped up and said, fine, I'll take that on. And we bought a used van, and threw some decals on it, and it it kept the program going so that we would go from Bowen in the morning and out to UBC and back. And I try to, I've always sort of felt that the more people on island that we can pick up, the less people there are driving to Snug Cove and parking. Snug Cove is I don't know what it's like for all the other islands, but BC Ferries does not have proper ferry marshaling on Bowen. There's no proper parking. BC Ferries doesn't own any land on Bowen, so the ferry marshaling is right in the middle of the main street, and it's kind of a disaster. But anyway, so my point was, if we can get as many people not driving to the Cove, the better. However, Bowen's transportation is shaped like fingers on a hand. There's no circle route that you can do. You'd spend your day, probably 3 hours going to pick everybody up. So pick up as many as we can. And that's kind of it. As I said, I feel a little bit of imposter syndrome because it's not really turned into anything about getting people around the island during the day. It's about getting to and from work, which is why I'm an optician, not a driver. I'm going to work and I spend my day at work. But I spend a lot of the day, still replying to texts about people who are riding with me and not. So the program originally was that we would have monthly riders and they would pay a monthly fare. And if I had 4 or 5 riders, it worked just the way it did with Jack Bell. It covered all the costs of our operating expenses, car insurance, fuel. We take the van off and on the ferry every day, so that would cover the cost of driving the van onto the ferry. And it worked great. And then March 2020, everybody started getting sick and nobody went to work anymore. And so along comes COVID, and adaptation had to be the name of the program. So I currently have no full-time riders, and I've just gone to a casual fare basis where people pay me, basically $20 return or $10 each way. If I can pick them up on island, I can. And if not, they meet me on the ferry and I get them downtown, or I get them through the city and out to UBC, and back again. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I think to answer some of the questions, I mean, almost anybody can do this, but access to a vehicle is a bit of a challenge. But the only reason we're a van is that BC Ferries, when we were full ridership, they give assured loading to a van pool rather than a car. So if you have 6 people or more, you get assured loading. Now, I assume that's anywhere in BC Ferries. And it's something that once a year I would communicate with Horseshoe Bay and have a little form that I fill out and tell them who my riders are. And away we go. It's not perfect. And since COVID came along, I haven't had full ridership, so I no longer really have assured loading. But the longtime staff in Horseshoe Bay, they know exactly who I am, and they still, they sort of know what we're doing. But yeah, why Vanpool was because it was really easy. I don't answer to anybody, but I also don't get any help from anybody. But it's funded solely by our ridership. And in this case now, I would say 50% of that is probably me, and 50% is my various riders. So the biggest shortcomings for running a van pool is keeping ridership, and being in touch with people. Social media. I have a Facebook page for the Bowen Island community Facebook page, and stay in touch with people to try and encourage people to join the van pool. And yeah, some of the other sort of shortcomings is insurance, because I'm just a person driving my own car, and so I don't. I think it was Ryan who was talking about insurance for a ride hailing program, and I have kind of avoided all of that. I don't go to ICBC and ask for anything over and above. I'm just essentially, I think as far as ICBC sees it, I'm probably giving rides to my friends rather than, I'm not running a business. I don't have a business license, and it keeps it really simple and kind of below the radar. Yeah, what was the other thing that I was thinking about? It's no longer self-supporting. So that's kind of financially, it's kind of one of the challenges. And so I've just sort of changed my perspective on how the van pool operates, because originally it was great. And I would tell anybody, if you had half a dozen people, go for it, because it made my commute costs really simple and really easy. So there we are.
Awesome. Thanks, Chuck.
Yep, you're welcome.
Definitely not an imposter. We got a range of programs here. So it's very cool that you've been doing this. What a neat contrast to some of the other stories. So thanks for doing that. And my glasses are kind of bugging me, so maybe we could talk offline. Dual purpose here.
I know a guy. Yeah.
Great. Well, yeah, so we've gotten through our presenters, and really are just a wonderful range of presentations. So thank you for all of you for your leadership in the space, for sharing your experiences with us. If you're in the audience here, please chime in on chat with the questions that have come up for you. I've got a bunch, and I love hogging the podium, so I'm not going to have a problem getting a bunch of questions in, but I want to make sure we're able to answer your questions. And I guess before I do, to our presenters, do you have any questions of each other? Like, I don't know how often you all get together and have a chance to talk, but you're running, a few of you are running pretty similar services, or have some similar challenges. So question, do any of you have questions of each other? I guess is my my first question to our panelists, or any comments about the services. Yeah, Chuck.
Yeah, it was actually a question for Ryan. I was just wondering whether anybody from Bowen has actually inquired whether you're expanding service to sort of closer to the Lower Mainland. Location doesn't seem to matter.
Well, it does a little bit. Yes, I had an inquiry from Bowen Island. So the TNS rules in BC, there's 5 regions, and so we're licensed in 2 of them. One of them is Vancouver Island, outside of the Capital Regional District, and the other one is northern BC. So think Highway 16 north, the Sunshine Coast, and Islands Trust. So I'm confused because I'm never really sure whether Bowen Island is an Islands Trust or Greater Vancouver.
So yeah, we are a part of Islands Trust, but we're part of GVRD.
Okay, I'll clarify that with the Passenger Transportation Board. They may, they're in Victoria. They may say, Bowen Island, where's that?
Right.
But we'll figure it out.
Well, and that is the thing. We have a bus service on island that is part of. We pay TransLink, but yeah, we're definitely part of Islands Trust. But yeah, I don't know the answer.
So I've got
the same thing. I know there was a Lyft driver on Bowen originally, briefly, but it was just one person, and the issue is often that the times when drivers want to be available and the times when people want to get home late at night are different.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chuck and Ryan. Unless I hear anything else from the panelists, I'm going to, I've got to, Sam, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to sort of jump a little bit on what Ryan was saying there. So one of the things that it was considered when we were first sort of starting the bus here was whether to get a taxi. And Ambassador did initially buy a taxi plate for Denman. But the more I sort of looked at it, there's not enough work for more than one person. We're only 1,400 people here. So it's pretty small. It's not enough work for one person, and like the dead time would be prohibitive. And then when people do want to go somewhere after a show, 15 are going to want it at once. So it's tricky, and it depends on your population. It can work, but it's not a given, especially if you're a smaller population base. And yeah, I mean, I wanted to say at some point I want to talk to Steve a lot about grants, because we are funded by the CVRD, but definitely our funding pool is a lot smaller than I wanted to do. Currently, we're seasonal, and I want to be year round. And so trying to find some grants. The problem is I am the coordinator, and I have I've got a 3-person transit committee, of which I'm also one. So there's only 2 other people on our transportation committee. I've got the 4 or 5 brilliant drivers who are just fantastic. But yeah, and I saw there's a comment about our logo. That was my partner did the logo. She's great. Also could not do this without her. She helps me manage a lot of the Facebook stuff. So, but yeah, I'd love to know more about grants and other things like that too.
Awesome. So maybe I'll let Anna jump in, and then we can have a little talk about funding. That was one of the things on my list that I'd like to really pick everyone's brains on. So Anna, do you want to jump in?
Thanks, Edu. Yes, quick question for Ryan. I was so surprised to hear that BC Transit bus leaves Langdale before the ferry arrives. Was there ever attempts to solve that, discussions with BC Transit? What could possibly be the reason for them to leave?
Yeah, so I mean the buses, they run, they have their schedule, and if the ferry gets too late, they can't move the bus off the schedule, because it's also serving other people in the community that need to get to work, etc. So they can't move it off. I mean, they're trying to increase the frequency, but inevitably, yeah, like the ferry is, especially the last ferry at night, there's often people stranded, and we end up being the people that go. We end up picking people up, and we do pool rides too for those sort of, particularly from the ferry, so which does help where everybody needs to go somewhere at once, and so you kind of want to turn it into more of a shuttle bus instead of just a taxi service. Do that.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Anna. So I've got a question for each of you, I guess, which is your startup. Like when you were when your program was kind of in this incubation, wow, what should we do kind of phase? Whether it's Chuck doing the van pool, or Ryan with the ride hailing, or Stephen with the bus. Did you do a pilot phase, or did you just go straight in? Like Anna, you had to get a bus, you had to create this app, like there's all this infrastructure. Did you all pilot your programs before you jumped in, or was it like, we're going to do this, make these investments and go for it? I get the sense it's been incremental in certain cases, but is there a pilot phase that's an important part of your programming? And why don't we let's go in reverse order from the way we started. So Chuck, or anyone can jump in, but Chuck, you start.
Yeah, so I guess the pilot project was that somebody had joined the Jack Bell Rideshare Association. So their capital outlay was negligible, right? You just sign up, and if they didn't have enough ridership, they would have handed keys back, and Jack Bell would have put their vehicle back into the fleet. So there's virtually no risk at that point. But when we bought the vehicle, it was a core group of riders who we were already doing it. So we already kind of knew what we were getting into. It was just that one idiot was going to have to take the financial risk of owning a vehicle, and kind of counting on the fact that there was going to be enough ridership to, because I took a car loan in order to buy a newer vehicle, because the previous vehicle was, unreliable, and it was terrible in the winter. It wasn't a terrifying financial risk on my part, but I did have to take that risk.
Right. And I guess your pilot, you were doing it before you saw there was demand, which kind of could, in a way, demonstrate that it was worth purchasing the vehicle. Other folks want to jump in on that? Pilots, no pilots? Like, how do you kind of get started to demonstrate there's a need before you acquire a vehicle?
I think I'm still in the pilot phase to some degree. We definitely, each sort of phase has come through in pilot. So originally just doing the shuttle back and forward was the quote unquote summer service. And then we did have our community service, which was my sort of more expanded route, was initially a pilot as well.
Okay.
And so now we're sort of rolling, and we're sort of out of the pilot for the basics, but I want to now do a pilot of running all the way through the winter for a couple of days a week. So that's sort of what's happening this year. Okay.
Cool. So you kind of pilot each phase before you go into it, in a way. You test it. Yeah. Okay. Other Stephen?
Sure. Yeah, we didn't have a pilot at all when we started. We just went straight into it. We needed to get some money, so we asked the regional district for some funding, and we were able to get Community Works funding, Community Works Fund funding, to buy a first bus. The regional director insisted that we show some community support, so we went out and got a whole bunch of signatures on a petition over a couple of weeks, and he was satisfied with that. So that's all we did. And then the first 3 years of our service with volunteer drivers was kind of the pilot for the current service that's funded and has paid drivers.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks. Anyone else want to jump in on that question?
Yes, I can quickly jump in. So we started with a 1-year commitment from council for the funding, and we had an incentive of that federal innovation fund. So we committed to a year, and then we looked at the numbers, how many people were riding, and then we got ongoing support. But it's still a bit of a political question here in Powell River, and there's still debates at council whether Zonga bus should be card or not.
Thanks. Great. Carmen's put a question in the chat, which I would kind of throw to all of you, and maybe it's I'll kind of tweak. You can see the question, so feel free to kind of answer that. I'm gonna morph it a little bit, which is kind of a question that's been on my mind, which is like, as some of you are kind of, it seems like some of your services kind of started as like an A to B, like ferry to ferry, going straight, and others was like all about customizing your location. Like Anna, the Zonga experience is really customized versus the initial service. I think Sam, you're talking about in Denman was like A to B, no stopping between. And with sparsely populated communities, in many cases, it's a long way between potential riders. And so I guess I'm kind of curious to hear how do you, and Chuck, you're talking about like you're picking people up along the way, or else they're meeting you there. When you think about what Cortes has, which is very sparsely populated population, but we got a lot of people going from one ferry to the other ferry. Like is one of the things I think I'm wondering about from you guys is like, would it make sense for us to have a shuttle that basically goes across Quadra from ferry to ferry, but picks up and drops off people on a circuit, almost ferry like matching up. But so it's kind of a hybrid between from A to B, where 80%, I think Jen was saying in the survey, people are all going to Campbell River. So I guess I'd just love to hear thoughts like on our specific instance here, where we've got two sparsely populated islands, but one very clear endpoint for a lot of people. Do you, I'd love to hear your general thoughts from all the panelists on, if you were a paid consultant and you were preparing a recommendation for us, what would, is this a shuttle from ferry to ferry that picks up and drops off? Is it a ride hailing service, a little bit more like Zonga? So, I mean, like more of a kind of like a micro transit on demand kind of service. So over to you all, like thoughts based on kind of what you've heard about our like our specific circumstances based on, what you're already doing. I'm trying to get free consulting services here. So Sam is the first to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think like geographically, in terms of population, we're a smaller island physically, obviously, but population-wise, we're pretty similar, and we have a similar situation to sort of Quadra and Cortes between Hornby and Denman. I think this really sort of ties into what Steve was saying earlier in terms of the sort of community connections and the social element is really vital to that's what takes it from being just a way to get around and to something a little bit more. And that having those people on the road, like being able to be on the road all the time and seeing what's kind of going on can be a really fantastic asset to a community beyond just getting around. To me, I think, yeah, having routes that sort of allow people to get around and get to places, get down to town, get back, is really valuable. And I think starting from that sort of, this is an infrastructure thing, putting in a route that people sort of get used to, because the patterns of behavior for how people are going to use it, you don't know yet. And you won't know until you're sort of underway. But I think if you build it, they will come. And you've got to be responsive to how people are moving around. And there's lots of like gathering ridership data is another whole topic, but it's really fascinating. And you can learn a lot about what is useful. And there's a lot of people, I've had so many people in the last couple of years who never rode a bus before because there wasn't one, but now their weekly life changes radically, like how they interact with community. I've got several seniors who are really isolated, who haven't been able to go out and do stuff, take themselves to the beach for the afternoon by themselves in years, and now they can just go and do it by themselves. So there's a lot of utility and a lot of stuff that you won't know before you start. And I think the way that our model has worked is really being incredible for the way our community is sort of functioning. There's also a tremendous amount of like loyalty and love for the bus itself, and like people get excited to see their bus, and people are excited to like have another way to get around that doesn't mean driving all the time. I've got lots of people who are perfectly capable of getting themselves around, have a car as well, but who come and ride the bus anyways. It's a nice way to get around. You see parts of the island you don't go to otherwise if it is a route. Yeah, so I mean, I'm biased. I like the way that we're doing things, but I think that's a really good way to build community and also sort of expand on that community and build connections.
Nice, thank you. I'd like to hear other responses, and just remind people in the audience, feel free to throw your questions on chat. I see some of the panelists are answering them as we go. So there's two streams of communication happening here, and feel free to tap their expertise and knowledge. Anyone else have thoughts on that question? That was really helpful. Yeah, Chuck.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, if it is a scenario of really just people from Cortes getting to Quadra and having to get across Quadra, you know, a small van, you know, being on Quadra, or somebody who drives onto the ferry doing what I do, seems pretty reasonable if it was the sort of thing where people, especially if it was the night before, you could arrange and you knew you were going to be on a given sailing in the morning. You're driving across, going into Campbell River. You're going to be there for 4 hours and then turning around and coming back. Or, you know, not necessarily that person coming back with them, but that doesn't seem like a particularly challenging thing, you know. Text messaging or a simple app to communicate seems like something that could be quite viable. But Sam's model of a free transit system, like if you had something on like I don't know what buses are on Quadra, but if you had something with small vehicles that could do a bigger area on smaller runs, but meet the Cortes ferry and then run people across the island, I feel like you might be able to hit a couple of birds.
Thanks. Yeah, it seems like the incrementalist approach, because I think there's need across Quadra and probably across Cortes too for seniors and others. But maybe you start with that, like we've been hearing about. Okay, thanks. Any other, Stephen?
Yeah, the ferry to ferry service on Quadra seems to make a lot of sense, and the ferries arriving from Cortes are not that frequent. So that there would be time in between those Cortes ferries to do some other routes around Quadra.
Yeah, okay.
Which I think might make the Quadra people feel better about just being a ferry to ferry shuttle service for Cortesians. Just a thought.
Yeah, those of us here on Cortes think that that's kind of appropriate. The world revolves around us, so the transit might as well too. Okay, just kidding. Thanks, Stephen. Great point. Any other kind of comments on that question? Because I'll move on then to it sounds like we've nailed that. So maybe we could talk. Oh, Ryan, did you want to? Were you?
I was just saying that, like the system that actually Anna, the Zunga bus in our system is actually the same software in the background. You know, that digital on demand and pooling rides when it's appropriate. You know, if that type of system that sort of with almost semi-scheduled with anchoring to the ferries makes a lot of sense. And I would say, yeah, unless you know you're going to need to move, you know, more than 6 or 10 people at once, I would avoid getting a big bus. The operating expense is a lot higher, whereas, you know, a minivan, you know, other than fuel, it's essentially the same operating cost as a car.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Great.
Yeah,
that's
I'll
helpful.
chime in quickly. So in my mind, while looking at the map of Cortes and your road network, I initially went to, well, you know, kind of have a bit of a loop already going there, and a fixed route connected with the ferry schedule kind of makes sense. But then there's still some significant offshoots that might be too far from that loop for people to walk to access the bus, right? So that software, which we use, which is Spare Labs, it's a company based in Vancouver. It does allow a bit of a hybrid where you have fixed points, as Ryan said. So you say, you know, we want to be at the ferry terminal at this time, and we want to be at the ferry terminal at these points. And then Other times you kind of, do your best moving people around to where they need to go. That might be another option. So I think those would be the two that I would investigate. So either fixed routes times with the ferry or using the software.
Yeah, thanks. And Brian, you're saying you're kind of interested in this area. You need a couple drivers, basically. Like, would your service kind of work in tandem, like with if we were a shuttle, or do you think, based on what you've heard, that coastal rides, like that this is an appropriate community for coastal rides?
Yeah, well, I mean, we operated on CCEDA, which is a smaller population. It's about having the people that are interested. I mean, the one thing is, whoever's driving or owning the vehicle there, needs to make, a decision. It's something we could help with, whether it's going to be subsidized or not, right? And, so,
Right.
I think, Anna was saying, yeah, it costs them $15 per ride to operate. And so, how much, there's probably a good chunk of the population that's willing and able to pay that. And that's fine. And so then, if we did have the volume to make it worthwhile for the drivers and the vehicle operators there, then yeah, it makes sense. But then the other approach there is, okay, well, maybe there's certain people or certain conditions that you need to subsidize. And then, we can, create a system for making that happen.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. And maybe we could chat about the fundraising and funding, because it sounds like some of you are funded. Like Chuck, you're funded by your users, and by yourself. The backup is you got to drive anyway, it sounds like. But I guess I'm kind of interested to understand the funding picture. It sounds like some of you have gotten tax requisitions and are funded through the tax base, and others are doing grants. Anna, you got council on side, and they really see this as a strategy to addressing a number of the social policy and climate challenges. So yeah, I guess I'm just kind of love to have a conversation about funding and kind of where did you start when you were in that early stage and you didn't have a demonstrated demand and you were kind of getting out there and trying to buy the first vehicles. And so yeah, let's jump in on just kind of tips, thoughts, experiences on fundraising and funding your program, riffing off of Kate's question on the chat. But Stephen, do you want to start?
Well, I just wanted to, get that question answered by Sam if he could, because here in the Nanaimo Regional District, there was already tax paid for the Nanaimo transit system by taxpayers over there, but Gabrielans did not contribute to that. So we had to have a referendum to get transit taken out of property taxes here on Gabriel, and I just wonder if you had to do that on Denman or if there was another way.
No, we were effectively paying into the Comox Valley transit system, and what that had manifested it in as over 30 years of asking for it was this single bus that initially was only running I think 3 times a day to Buckley Bay, and you had to get there. And so that was a big part of the sort of move. The downside that we've had is that because we've been a pilot and we're new, so like we're still demonstrating the need, demonstrating the value of the service. But I've had to do a lot of work, and I was talking earlier about sort of ridership tracking data. I've had to do a lot of demonstrating the value of what we're doing, and I've been fighting hard for this kind of all the way through. And so the first sort of pilot year, I don't know what the budget was the first year, but when I took over, we just started a 2-year contract for $75,000 a year, and that was what we were running off. And this last year, for the conclusion of that 2-year contract, I was trying to get a bunch more, and I know from across Hornby and Denman, it's $230,000 is raised a year in taxes. And so I want to run year round. The Hornby bus service only runs for the summer season, and they were initially started just to be a sort of tourist, helping people move around on Hornby. And so I think that was already in place, and then the CVRD was like, well, we want to find a way to get people onto that bus service across Denman. So that's sort of where we came into it. And so this last year, we've both been given 100,000. They're starting in June. They're starting June 27th. They run through the September long weekend. We started May 1st, and we'll be running through with the full 5 days a week until the September long weekend, and then going to just 2 days a week over the winter is my hope, as long as maintenance doesn't chew up the rest of my budget before we get there.
Thanks, Sam. Other people want to talk about fundraising budgets, funding generally? Any other comments that just to build off of what's been raised?
I guess
Okay.
I'll just quickly say we started out thinking that the buses is the expensive piece. We learned that operating, it's really where we need the money. It's operations, right? It's the driver wages, the driver benefits, the fuel, the software, the call center. That's really the majority of the cost. So don't sort of get hung up on the purchase of the bus, because that's really not the biggest piece. The biggest piece is keeping it going.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really really important. Appreciate that. It sounds like some of the services started with volunteer drivers, or at least Gertie did. But yeah, it sounds like to mature the service, that's probably the biggest expense, and maintenance. So thank you. I really appreciate that point. We're going to start to wrap up here. So any last questions on the chat should come in. I guess I'm interested. We heard from the survey that Jen was sharing with us. People are really interested in this partly to address climate and reduce their GHGs of having to drive. But then you're driving, and like Sam, you got a big bus, that's burning diesel. We got a shuttle that may be going back and forth, maybe empty at times. Like, I guess I'm kind of curious, like the leadership, Stephen, that you guys are undertaking with getting the electric buses is amazing. And like, if we could all get, that would be, like, what a dream. I know they're hard to get, even if you have the money, but I guess I'm kind of curious, do any of you do any kind of carbon, like greenhouse gas emissions analysis to demonstrate kind of the benefit? I just kind of curious to hear like what your thinking is about kind of quantifying the environmental benefit. Like, there's clearly social benefits and getting cars off of the road, off the ferries, and Anna, indicating like that what you were talking about, the community and providing a service to folks that otherwise just couldn't make these trips. Let's talk about the environmental side of this and how you think about that, how you analyze it, how you get the data on it. Any comments, questions, thoughts?
We've done quite a bit of thinking on that, and I think there's two ways to think about it. If you just look, very narrowly, and you just look at sitting on the bus versus sitting in the car and what is the diesel per person, it may not look very good for the diesel bus. But I think you need to take a broader view of, for example, an anecdote. We have a person taking Zanga bus. Now their household has gone down to 1 vehicle from 2. Right now they're investing in electric bike. Now we need less parking spaces in our town so that everything gets closer to everything and people walk more, right? Like, there's just a broader benefit there that make sure not to miss. So it's not just about the bus and the diesel.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. That's a great points. Other points on that, Sam? Then Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to agree. I think that sort of broader view. I mean, a lot of the trips that I do I'm taking a group of kids. I run a bunch of after school programs and was one of my other hats, so I know a lot of the youth on island. And for a lot of them, it's the only way to get around. And the alternative is you try and get mom and dad to drive you. And so then they're taking a trip that they wouldn't take. But oftentimes it's not only that, but I'm picking up maybe 5-6 kids on a circuit, and I'm dropping them all off at the lake, and then I pick them all up later and I take them home. So if each of those kids' parents were driving them to the lake, otherwise, that's a whole bunch of other cars that are not getting on. And again, that social thing of they get to go to the lake without bothering
Yeah,
mom and dad.
yeah,
There's
kids
that part
being
too.
able, yeah, that's independence. I mean, super important. Yeah, kids being able to have that freedom. Like, absolutely, yeah. Okay, thanks, Sam.
And
Stephen?
yeah, I would agree too that like I think it's a gain. It's also about an investment long term in changing the mindset of how your community gets around and providing an alternative. Nobody can ditch their car if there's no other way to get around. But
Yeah,
if you start putting that in place, the options start to open up.
awesome. Stephen, you have
Yeah,
a
I just wanted to say I totally agree with both Anna and Sam on that. Getting someone to get rid of that second car is the first step, and eventually maybe they'll get rid of both cars. But it's we did some greenhouse gas accounting. We have done. I don't have the numbers in my head. They were a little bit positive, not huge, but it's more about giving people the experience of riding the bus and getting that mindset going about using transit instead of driving everywhere.
yeah. Thank you. I think we got through all the questions. I've got a bunch more, but I think we're running out of time. We've taken your evenings here and really appreciate all of your time. Maybe everyone, one word in the chat that you would like to share in closing that you're left with here from today's discussion. Please feel free, even our presenters, just a word in the chat, word or two in the chat as we close out here. And we're going to do the draw now. So we'll see. Hopefully, those of you are typing away. We'll share any comments. I just mine is, I'm going to say it because I've got the mic here, but it's just appreciation. Like we heard 5 incredible stories, and Anna, you were like to see a city staffer pioneering something so innovative in a small community. It's really great. So I'm really mine is appreciation, and my second one is inspired. And you guys it's really neat to see the kind of innovation coming out of rural communities. So thank you all. There's some great ones coming in. Optimistic, inspiring. Thank you. New ideas, warm fuzzies. Kept keeping it weird. Thanks, Sam. Awesome. Us Islanders got to stick together. Moving community, great, great comments coming in. Thanks. We'll have the chat here. Kids independence. Thanks, Renata. Absolutely, we need kin independence. Get them out of our hair. Get them out adventuring. Expanded perspectives. So thanks for that, and appreciate all of you jumping in there. We're going to do the survey. We're going to do the draw now. And if you haven't done the survey, everyone, please don't forget to do that. It's the link is higher in the chat. And to our speakers, just a huge appreciation for spending your evening with us. You're driving vehicles and you're doing innovative programs, and you took 2 hours out of your schedule. So it's really great. Thank you for doing that. We are going to Sandy just put in less seniors isolation. Yeah, I heard a lot. I know there's a lot about community connections in today's conversation, which is a nice, you start by talking about transportation, and you end up, there's so many other things that come out of it. So thanks for that, Sandy. Okay, so Jen, we're going to do the draw,
Yes.
and we're going to ask the panelists to help with
Yes.
this.
So if the speakers are able to stay,
Okay.
if the speakers are able to stay for one more minute, I would love your help.
You're going to make
So
someone rich, guys.
Yeah. So we have 4 prizes. So we're going to draw 4 names, and the way we're going to do it is via spreadsheet. So I have 173 names on a spreadsheet, and I'm going to ask each of the speakers to pick a number between 1 and 73. So we'll start with Ryan. Can you pick a number between 1 and 73?
39.
Okay. Anna, can you pick a number?
And did you not
57.
say at the start it was 173?
Yes, 173.
So not just 73.
No, thanks, Steve. If I
yeah,
misspoke, between 1 and 173.
Okay, then I'll make mine 157.
Awesome. Okay,
is
Sam.
This is a partnership with the UBC Psychological Department, and we're going to assess the numbers that you all pick.
Well, I'm a dedicated role-playing gamer, so I've actually rolled my number. So 93, just to throw your data off.
Fantastic. Okay, and Chuck gets the last pick because Steve is actually on our team, so we're gonna
I gotta go with I gotta go with 42.
42. Awesome. Okay, well, we'll let the lucky winners know that their numbers were picked.
Great. Okay, so we're 5 minutes early, so to speak, but thank you all for your time tonight. Thanks for to those of you that participated. Thanks for taking the time to talk about this. You'll be hearing more from us. We're going to be doing our in-person consultations, and then we're going to be trying to gin up a program here, get a pilot going. So tonight's been a good inspiration for that. So thank you all for taking the time, and hope you have a great rest of the evening. Thanks, and take care.
Great.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Sadhu.
Sadhu.
Take care.